Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I am going to be going over a tier list of every single mythic in Gems of War. This was something I've been meaning to cover for a while. It was also suggested by Hime, who ended up doing a version of his own over at his YouTube channel, so definitely go check that out. I have it linked in the description, as well as a link just at the end of this video if you just want to go catch it then. This video might be a little bit towards the longer side, as we are basically going to be going over every single mythic in Gems of War and going over essentially where they fall as far as how decent they are. I will not be showing each and every one of them. However, if you do want to see them yourself, simply just go into game, go over to the options and go to base rarity on order, and go to show all for these three options, and this will end up showing you every single mythic in the game all the way at this top section right over here, regardless of if you own it or not, and you can simply just click on one of them to see what all of them are. I will just be doing them off of memory just to save some time from constantly clicking on every single one, but just have this open on your own game and you'd be able to see them even if you don't currently own them by simply clicking show all and just checking it as we go through. But anyways, let's go and get started at basically placing every single mythic in the game as far as where it falls into how useful it is. This is going to be based on multiple factors, though it is primarily going to be based on how well it is at overall game modes, like if it's good on PvP, good at Guild Wars, good at Delves, and also on if it can upscale. Basically on two big things, three major things, I guess. Can it increase the rate at which you gain resources, either by winning quickly or by simply giving you resources? Can it help you upscale? Upscale are things that basically allow you to kill things that are way higher stats than you. So things like raids, invasions, Tower of Doom, delves, stuff like that. And can it actually win quickly? Things that are extremely tanky generally are not as good as things that can help you win within under a minute. So that is basically everything that this is going to be based on. So let's get into that. So first off, we have ourselves Abney Sia. This is one of the first several mythics that end up coming into the game, and it kind of shows because it is a pretty dated mythic. This was back when we didn't really have too many explosion options, and this thing is just so expensive for what it does. It's basically primarily an exploding troop, but it costs 22 mana cost, and there's currently no way in the entire game to start it at half mana, which puts it at a pretty big disadvantage. It does have a good summon in that it can constantly keep summoning Inferno Kings, and does have a little bit of a buff to the Daemons in that it gives them a little bit of attack and magic, a little bit of attack and HP, but it is overall just very, very underwhelming for 22 mana cost for the type of explosion it has. Ragnagord can do about the same thing for only 7 mana cost for its first cast, and then 14 for all the other ones, which is way cheaper than that. You can get like Mountain Crusher, which you can do it for 6, assuming you're using a half mana start. You can do it with Leprechaun for literally empowered. There's just so many better options out there these days for gaining mana, and Abney Sia is just one of those extremely dated mythics that needs a little bit of love, as it's pretty low down there. The only thing that's keeping it from being pretty much the lowest tier here is just the fact that it does not really have, or it does have Inferno King, which is a decent summon attached to it. And of course, basically what these rarities are, you can kind of see I just did it based on the rarity order from all the way to mythic, kind of all the way to common, and that's basically where they are. Like, these are the real mythics, these are kind of like legendary mythics, and these are basically mythics that are as good as commons, essentially, just completely useless. But anyways, next up is Infernus. He is one of the better first crafts in the game. Biggest thing he has going for him is he just does a lot of stuff simultaneously, and he's just a good damage source to just simply plop down. This is most noteworthy in something like PvP. He's not really used in too many of the other game modes, but PvP is where he normally shines best, as well as anything that you might specifically use him for, like if it's a Broken Spire or an elemental kind of restriction, something like that, you would end up bringing him out as well. Is a Divine, so you can end up using it with Divine Ishbala and Divine teams if you want to, though not as good in those kind of combinations these days because that tends to be used with the combination of Divine Ishbala into Quillen, so more of a skull spam rather than cast spam. However, the biggest things that it has going for it is it's still the only troop in the entire game that has a good high damage source, into the fact that it also has a board clear into a storm. It has a red storm every single time it gets a kill. It has 5 explosions, which helps board clear as well as accumulate mana, and it just has a really high amount of damage in that it will 100% of the time hit 2 enemies for full damage, and then the 2 adjacents to them for half the damage. So this gets basically pure damage down. The other really noteworthy aspect of this troop, it is the best burner in the entire game. It places burn on all enemies every single extra turn it does. This is most relevant because you can end up using this to synergize with hero classes that have triple damage on burning, basically allowing you to plow down the entire enemy team. These are things like Dragon Guard and Warlord that can just tear out entire teams with a skull spam into an Infernus. This also works pretty good with Elma Grims and other troops that are also burning dependent, in that anything that ever needs the burning mechanic will specifically need him. And even if they don't specifically need the burning, just simply having him on your team, assuming the enemy team can be burned, is essentially a free 3 damage to all enemies per turn, basically meaning you're doing 12 damage per turn by doing absolutely nothing. Absolutely fantastic damage source, generally one of the first few crafts you want to get in the game, and just overall, really great troop. Followed by that, we have another really great troop, Tina 9000. This is something earlier that I probably would have put more towards B, but recently, a couple months back, it did get a really substantial buff. It wasn't even that much, they basically just made it work correctly, but in them making it work correctly, it just made it so good. The biggest thing with Tina 9000 is, at this current moment in time, it is the strongest 50% spell reduction troop in all of Gems of War. This is obviously pretty relevant, as having something like a 50% spell reduction against Yagwe Queen of Tanya, which is pretty meta, is really good. You get to get a lot of their damage mitigated. Works really good on Red Guild War Day for stuff like that. Works really good in low-level delves because you basically one-shot them or pretty easily two-shot them. It does 3 really high concentrated true damage hits, and while it is a little bit random, and random things don't tend to be as good, they're so high that it normally can secure a kill, or even multiple kills when working with lower stats, and ends up gaining armor every single time, which synergizes with the fact that it has spell reduction, so unless they're going to be doing true damage, they're not going to kill through you as quick, and even if they are doing true damage, you still have the 50% reduction to it, and just a really tanky option. It's normally used in second slot, though it's not required. If you're using it in something like Delves, you'd probably use it deeper down into your team, but if you're using it in like PvP, or Guild Wars, or maybe even a Tower of Doom, you might put it more towards a second slot, but second and third tend to be its 2 biggest spots. Third, if you want to keep it a little bit safer, if you want to keep it safer from like a Yagwe, in case you're up against some kind of team that presses a lot of damage onto your first 2 slots, just to have a backup like on Red Guild War, but it mostly shines in second slot. You normally never want to put it in first, just because you want to keep his armor relatively high if you're going to be using it for its skull damage. It does end up getting a substantial amount of extra damage just from having a high amount of armor, and generally what you'd want to do is, if you had it in second slot, by the time your first slot dies, Tina probably got to cast at least once, if not multiple times. You get to accumulate a bunch of armor, and then that armor just allows you to one-shot everything with skulls. So it has a lot of different options, and it works really well. And of course, they made it finally so its ability can no longer multi-shot something that's already dead. That was the biggest buff that it ends up getting in recent times. So no longer will it just go and waste, like, just do one shot on one troop and then just waste those other 2 slots on the troop it already killed. It will always use all 3 of its shots. So really nice buff there. Next up, we have Arachnine Weaver, which is kind of in between on an A or a B. I guess for now, we'll kind of just put it into an A. I kind of just want to put it down into a B, but oh no, it has a lot of versatility. Weaver covers a lot of ground, one of the best true damage troops in the game, works really good with Tina as well, but they're starting to bring true damage back slowly, and Weaver is one of those things that as true damage becomes bigger and bigger, it too will also become more viable. Biggest thing about Weaver that is pretty relevant is it ends up getting a massive explosion every single time it gets a kill, and it can get a kill pretty easily when combined with other true damage troops, and it can hit the last 2 slots with a decent amount of true damage that way. It also ends up having the highest amount of web of any troop currently. It has the capability of placing web on all enemies, which ends up getting a decent value because then they don't get any magic for a short duration. One other thing that makes it extremely viable, and probably the main reason why I'm putting it into A rather than to B, is mostly the fact that it has a web spinner summon, which is quite arguably the best summon that any troop currently has. Web Spinner is insanely good. It gets triple damage onto everything it touches, plus it can infinitely loop into itself because of the green that it creates. It's even better than Yasmin's Chosen just on its own. It's basically like summoning another Mythic off your Mythic. It's only 75% chance per kill, but it's so high that it's generally going to do it every single time. And on top of that, it also has Impervious and Stealthy, so it's going to be able to keep that trait, and it's not going to be able to get killed by random status effects, and even as Stealthy, so it can't even be hit directly. So that into like Tina or something else, you just never need to worry about it getting hit. The main reason why I don't have it in S is it doesn't have a natural amount of mana accumulation, and its damage is relatively low, especially if you're using it as your only true damage source. If it had some kind of automatic board control, it'd probably be a little bit higher, but that's probably good for it now. So, Wardbreaker, another one that I'm a little bit conflicted on putting into A or B, but I guess we'll put it into A. Wardbreaker, one of those things that it's It can vary. You know what? We're going to put it to B. It's something that I really want to put quite a bit high because it does have a few really good teams for it. Wordbreaker basically hits all enemies and does Web Spinner's explosion every single time rather than sometimes. Really big thing holding it back is it has the highest mana cost of any troop in the game, with the only exception being Gogh. But because Gogh is so expensive, you can pretty much say it has the highest in the game. It has a 30 mana cost. Gogh, of course, has 32, so it's really, really bad against mana drain and similar mechanics. It also doesn't naturally have a half mana start at this current moment in time, which is also something kind of holding it back. Even something like Weaver ends up having that. But Wordbreaker, he gets to do a lot of AoE. This can be countered by Submerge, but the main instances he shines is with things like Bronze-Lock Pistol. Bronze-Lock Pistol into Wordbreaker, insanely good combination. You run that with like Bronze-Lock Pistol, Wordbreaker, Leprechaun with a Cedric, and you're pretty much golden. That's a really solid mid-range gold farming team, even sometimes better than key team, depending on the fight that you're up against. It's a really solid gold team. And of course, being able to get a lot of gold is definitely very beneficial, and it is one of the better troops at doing that, oddly enough. For 1 trophy, 2 trophy PvPs, you know, the easier ones or the mid-range ones, generally what it's used for. It's also a good thing to bring into Wordbreaker on occasion. You do want to go and have a nice damage source, and given that it does a high amount of damage while simultaneously doing a high amount of mana, it scores very well in Guild Wars, and it can fit for all 3 days, yellow, red, and green, all 3 of its colors. But yeah, mainly the high mana cost is the biggest thing holding it back, and that and its traits are rather lackluster, and just more towards the average side. Speaking about towards the average side, right in the middle here, we have something to put there. Uryali. So Uryali, it does true damage to all enemies. It has a poison all enemies on its extra turn. However, this is a lot more irrelevant than things like Obsidian or Infernus that also have the capability of putting a status effect on all enemies. The main reason being that poison does not cleanse naturally. Once you poison something, they are going to stay poisoned unless they specifically cleanse it or bless it. And given that, there really isn't much of a point that Uryali can constantly keep placing poison. It's a little bit of a weird trait. I wish they would have just added it onto her ability automatically, like how Web Spinner has it, and just given her a different final trait that wasn't completely trash. But yeah, that's the biggest thing holding her back. One of her main redeeming qualities is she could theoretically have some decent combinations with Nagas into the future, particularly with Marilith combos, and Assassin Hero class isn't that bad. But the main thing probably keeping it decent is its summon. It does summon a troop that has 25% Skull Reflect. If I'm not mistaken, it's the only troop in the game that 100% summons something that has 25% Skull Reflect. There's a few other that have it, like that one weird troop from the, oh, what's that one delve called? The, that one Thorns one. Why did I just forget it? Primal Rift. I believe something from Primal Rift has like a 50% chance, if I'm not mistaken, of summoning something like that. But Uryali is the only thing that 100% summons something that has 25% Skull Reflect, which makes it a little bit of a skull counter in that regard. But overall, really average, nothing too special. It's just kind of one of those things that you might run in Guild Wars, just since it has a decent summon on it, just to keep your team from, you know, being depleted, and just to be able to get that tank so you're a little bit safer against skull spam that keeps getting used against you. But it's just average, basically just Guild Wars. Very, very rarely would you bring it to much else. Speaking of that, that's something else I'd probably also put in there. Yasmin's Chosen. Yasmin's Chosen has seen better days. Biggest issue with that is gem spawners in general are rather lackluster in the current state of the game. The other big problem that Yasmin's Chosen currently has, even though it's extremely good on Green Guild War Day because it has a bunch of Entangle, it has a bunch of green loop into its own color, has a lot of stuff that generally benefits green troops. However, the biggest thing that it really has going against it is ever since they buffed Web Spinner several months back, and Weaver Web Spinner combos and stuff like that, there really isn't much of a need to use Yasmin anymore. If you want an Entangle option, you just use Sylvania Leshy, or anything that can just tangle better than it. It's just really, really bad. It only does Entangle on green, and it's completely random. And it's dependent on those entangles to be able to get its boost ratio, and overall just not really going to get you too far in most battles compared to other troops. If you own Web Spinner, which is a lower rarity than that, you'd be running it in around 95% rather than running this Mythic. Not to mention it shares the same colors as Wild Queen, and ever since Wild Queen's buff, it is generally the way to go in that kind of situation, because it basically does what she does, but better in a way. Guard's Avatar. This is a bit of a hard one to place. It has seen better days. In the current meta of the game, I would probably have to put it over towards about a D. Almost kind of want to move it up to a C, but it has a lot of reliability issues. It's a 24 mana cost full AoE that can basically hit up to one shot. You normally use it with something like an Honor or some kind of other armor buff, like an Honor, Apothecary, Guard's Avatar, or one other option, something like that along those lines. It's an okay. Biggest issue is if you get manged or any kind of other thing that tears all your armor, he's pretty much done. He doesn't get any damage, and of course, a lot of that mechanic is around between Megavore, Mang, Undying, Trickster Shot, other similar things. A lot of stuff likes to tear armor, and if they're not tearing armor directly, they might have physical damage that will also basically tear your armor, just in a different way. And he's really dependent on his armor, similar to how Rowan is. The biggest issue with him, though, is you need to go even further than Rowan sometimes, because it hits everything simultaneously. So if they end up getting resummoned, you'd have to go kill it all over again. He's really good against daemons. The only real big issue with that is daemons are rather dead as far as the meta is concerned. There's no half mana start for them. A lot of them, there's just not many good troops coming to the category, and it just doesn't have as much synergy as it used to have back in the day, because a lot of the better troops, like let's say Gogh, for example, aren't really that meta anymore, even though they used to be used in almost every single team. Now Mountain Crusher Titan and other similar things tend to get used instead. So Guard's Avatar overall pretty lackluster. If you were to use it, you mainly just use it for the White Helm upgrade, which isn't really a reason other than the upgrade, but you can somewhat use it for some like fun PvP teams just to mess around with, and very occasionally you can kind of get away with him in Guild Wars. But unless you specifically need a daemon counter in order to silence all daemons, you're almost never bringing him out. So, Wild Queen. This is either an A or a B. I'm probably going to put it into a B. Main reason being gem spawns. Gem spawns are just really, really inconsistent. Ever since they changed how gem spawns work about a year and a half ago, they've always been quite a bit weaker since then. It's because they don't align as much as they used to. She did get buffed about a couple months ago. That main buff that she ended up getting was she now ends up doing a more gem spawn. It used to be 16, and still is on the Nintendo Switch version, but in every other version she now does 22 mix of skulls and greens. And this is pretty beneficial because you can keep getting a skull storm, if I'm not mistaken, whenever she gets a kill, or anything on your team gets a kill. You end up getting a skull storm, so you can constantly keep spamming greens into skulls. It kills very, very quickly in Guild Wars. You would normally want to use this for purple Guild War and green Guild War. Similar things you can end up using Yasmin for, the exact same things that you'd want to use basically Wild Queen for. Use it into Green Seer, into Wild Queen for purple Guild War Day. You do it into Web Spinner, into Wild Queen for Green Guild War Day. Same thing can be done with Yasmin, though personally, from my experience, Wild Queen just does it better. So there just really isn't much of a need to use Yasmin in those particular instances. But yeah, great for skull spam. There's a lot of various skull spam teams you can get away with it. It's just a little bit risky since you don't have that consistency with ability, since it's not a converter. Fair Shra, a little bit of a weird one. Due to his 150% soul gain, I'm probably going to have to put him into an A. Even though I normally say he's like a first craft, second craft, third craft, definitely within one of those three. I wouldn't necessarily say he's an S tier, mainly because he's not really used in any context other than gaining souls. But he is so exceptionally overpowered at gaining souls that he might as well be put higher up. He's pretty good at one-shotting too, especially in early game, mid-game, and the earlier part of late game. Anything beyond that, it doesn't tend to do it as much. You do it with like a Dragon Soul, you catch Dragon Soul a few times, it does like 30-something damage to them. You then have Fair Shra doing about 120, 130 or so. So if that 120, 130 after you just did 50, so let's just say 150 or so, if you can kill something with 150 damage, Fair Shra is probably still relevant to run it with PvP. Works pretty good with a Word Breaker into a Fair Shra, pretty nice combination to have around. Works good obviously with Dragon Soul, double Fair Shra, Umberwolf, Dragon Soul, Fair Shra, Azarus, Umberwolf, Dragon Soul, double Fair Shra into any hero class with Purple Storm, and other similar teams basically around that premise, particularly on farming things like First Challenge and Winning Fields. But you can also use it for PvP's sake, and something like a Mountain Crusher, Dragon Soul, Fair Shra Wordbreaker, something like that kind of combination works pretty good for passively gaining like 20,000 or so souls per hour in PvP while still winning at a decent rate. So yeah, he just exponentially increases the rate at which you have end up accumulating souls, and has an okay one-shot. Does have a yellow to purple convert, so it can feed back into itself. As a troop for damage, and if you were to base it on its actual effectiveness at being able to win a battle, it's probably more towards like a C tier or so. But due to how good of its soul gain is, especially since that synergizes with other things that might eventually boost decently off of souls, it's pretty high up there. And obviously, if you ever need soul farming for Dawnbringer or just getting all your souls, always good to have around. Stonehammer! There's no way I'm not putting him in F. Sorry, Stonehammer. We're actually getting a new Mythic next week, assuming that we're actually getting that Mythic next Friday. I believe we are. That is basically going to be a slightly better version of Stonehammer. That's going to have like some spell reduction attached to it too. But the biggest issue with Stonehammer, even though it has the highest score reduction in the entire game at 80%, is even if that was 100%, it wouldn't matter that much. Doom Skulls hit through it. The way that the +5 damage on Doom Skulls, they end up hitting through it. Enrage ends up hitting through it. There just isn't really much of a reason to be using this thing. because his biggest gimmick is he has 80% score reduction, yet there's things that directly hard counter him. Even though he has immune to stun, you can still even curse and stun him too, so it's just really underwhelming. He has a 24 mana cost that definitely needs to be changed to 20 mana cost. Why they haven't done that yet, I do not know. Do keep in mind that they do have a patch coming out soon that could theoretically rebalance some of these kind of things, but I don't know, Stonehammer just is awful. All it is like a stun burn that you can do better off of other troops like Infernus and Obsidian. It ends up creating, I believe, brown-red mix, if I'm not mistaken, which feeds a little bit into himself, but he just ends up blocking mana way too much, given that he's supposed to be used in the first slot, and his ability just to use it for the sake of using it without using his score reduction is just pointless. He's just a really extremely underwhelming troop. Other than that, though, on the other side of the spectrum, we have ourselves an Iron Gut, and I am putting him probably all the way to the front here. And yeah, Iron Gut is just absolutely broken in Delves. It is basically auto-win all of Delves that is applicable with Iron Gut the second you own that thing. It is so good at Delves and Tower of Doom. Mainly Delves, though. Him with like a Mirage Queen, which is something you can easily obtain. Normally the combination is something like Mountain Crusher, Apothecary, Iron Gut, and then either Mirage Queen in the last slot or Possess King in the last slot. And it is just insanely good. Basically, he has a Devour rate based on whatever his attack currently is. And of course, Devour ends up gaining all the attack from the enemy. So normally after you get one Devour in normal game modes, or, you know, in like raids, invasions, Tower of Doom, Delve, stuff like that, you get one Devour, you are already at over 100 attack. So you're just going to constantly keep devouring from there forth. He has a 100% chance to an extra turn, so you can just simply feed it with mana, get it like a Mountain Crusher down, feed right back to full mana, and just constantly keep looping over and over again into an infinite 100% kill loop. If they have immune to Devour, you can simply just curse them with Mirage Queen, or transform them with Possess King. Normally you'd want to go Mirage Queen, though there are some specific instances you might switch out, like if you can't use the specific color, would be one of those instances, because of course the main place you use them in is Delve, so you might be color restricted. But yeah, any Delve he can be used in, insanely good. Mainly Delves and Tower of Doom. However, if you want to use him in PvP, he's not horrible. Normally you'd still use it with Mountain Crusher, Apothecary, stuff like that normally, but I don't know, he's kind of average for PvP. The main spot he shines is just auto-win all of Delves. If you need to win Delves, if you just want to start doing Delves on a regular basis, Iron Gut is the troop to get. He is unparalleled to anything else as far as Delves are concerned. And slightly Tower of Doom. Biggest issue with him in Tower of Doom is the Dooms themselves, you cannot Devour with him. Though that can be obfuscated by putting him in second slot, let your first slot die out, and then just let his infinite attack kill the Doom, if you want to use it for that method. So you can still get away with it. Ubistet! This thing was something that would easily be like right over here next to Infernus in the past. Though in the current state of the game, I do have to probably place him down to about a B, personally. Main reason for this is his boost ratio got moved from a 1 to 4 to a 1 to 6 based on all the attack in game. We are going to be getting auto boost ratio next patch, so that convenience might possibly buff him up to an A. But biggest issue with him is he sometimes has problems securing kills now that his boost ratio is a bit lower. You actually have to do damage to them first with something else like Infernus or some kind of other cast before you can actually get those kills. So you have to waste a whole cast to basically be able to get him into double kill range. He still has that instant kill and can double kill. However, there's so many better things these days for doing Delves, so you don't necessarily need it for that. And there are better things that you can use for Tower of Doom, especially since the Doom itself has immune to his instant kill. So he's rather kind of more almost towards average these days. You still run him for PvP, you can still run him for Guild Wars. Rashka teams will probably use them into the future. Really good on those kind of events for the class events too, even though it barely ever comes around. But yeah, it's just a decent double kill troop. There's better options out there in the current state of the game, but still a decent troop, just not that high up there. So, Champion of Anu. This is probably going to have to go towards the middle, maybe even a little bit lower than middle. I think his score reduction and the fact that the Mythic that's coming out next Friday synergizes with it, I'm going to probably put it into C. Biggest issue that this guy has is he doesn't really excel at much. He's pretty tanky, he's pretty good for Blue Guild War, but that's about as far as it goes. He has like a 60% score reduction, 1 to stat to all blue troops per turn, which is what makes him particularly good in Blue Guild War. I've been using him a lot on my Nintendo Switch account and have been absolutely decimating Blue Guild War. Of course, the earlier in the game, the slightly more effective he is, though, with all the kind of aspects that he has. But he has a full AoE if you end up hitting their first slot. It has a silence and a drain and a stun, I believe, attached to it as well. So it has a lot of disabled that it can end up doing with its ability. Just the biggest thing holding it back is it doesn't really have any board control. And if it did end up having that, like if it converted something to blue or something like that, even just a few explosions, it probably would be quite a bit higher, even a B or A possibly. But it doesn't have that. It just simply ends its turn after it does its ability. So outside of blue Guild Warrior, not really using this thing too much. It's kind of like Yasmin in that its main thing that it's restricted to is basically just its Guild War color day. In her case, purple and green, and Anointed One case, or sorry, wow, I just said his name and I already forgot his name. Chosen One. No. Wait, seriously. Champion of Anu. But yeah, he's mainly only used for blue Guild War, essentially, is the bottom line. Next up, Stormheim, or Storm Shield, I mean. I'm starting to forget all the names. I haven't needed to do it for so long without being able to see any info on them. But anyways, Storm Shield. You would kind of think this would be insanely good, given that Titan hero class is the absolute best hero class in the entire game. But that is not quite the case with this thing. This thing is really underwhelming. The best thing that it has going for it is it has barrier, and it can barrier on Red Guild War Day, which is something that's pretty rare, even though next Mythic will kind of have that, make that a little bit more obsolete. But it's kind of like a Dawnbringer in that regard. It keeps gaining barrier. In its case, it gains a barrier every extra turn to a random ally. It's okay with giants and stuff. The biggest issue is the only premise of it is it kills things with one-shots, and killing one troop with one-shots isn't really that good. It's something that brings Ferris Raw down a little bit. A lot of one-shot troops just aren't really that good if they're only specifically killing one thing with no other kind of side effect like Devour or Board Control or extra turn or anything like that. And his is even guarantee, whereas Ferris Raw's is can reach like a couple hundreds, especially with multiple of them. He's Stormheim, even in most optimal situation, is only hitting like 60 or so true damage, which isn't really that good. Can maybe hit a little bit higher than that, but if they have barrier, if they have anything else, it's just not going to work out that well. It's really, really underwhelming. Speaking about underwhelming, Wolf Garrick, I know he has Devour to a degree, and he's kind of somewhat like Ubistet, but worse. But no, I have to go all the way down to F with him. Wolf Garrick, he ended up getting a buff, quotation marks right there, a buff, a little while ago. I think it was, what, a couple months ago? But they ended up changing how his final trait worked a little bit. It did not save him at all. There's no half mana start for War Gears. There's no troop that has, there's no hero class for War Gears. He just lacks so much damage. His whole premise is he gets a kill, and then he devours a random ally, or a random enemy. But the biggest issue with this is he has almost no damage. His base damage is at like 30 or something ridiculously low. I think it's even in the 20s. Even all the way in endgame, it's like in the 20s or something ridiculously low. It's just way too low of damage. His trait can help with that some, but it's not enough with how many extra turns you need just to go and get it rolling. And even then, you get a random Devour. You don't even get to choose where that Devour goes, and it can easily hit something that has immune to Devour, since you don't specifically get to target it. It's just really, really underwhelming, extremely inconsistent, and there's almost no purpose for him compared to an Ubistet. Ubistet's just basically the superior version of him. Ubistet, Iron Gut, stuff like that. If you want the Devour, you go Iron Gut. If you want the double instant kill premise, somewhat similar to Wolf Garrick, you just go with Ubistet. There's just no real place for Wolf Garrick in this game. And the only real benefit he has is Impervious, but that's not enough to save him. Gargantor, 100% useless. He used to be considered the worst mythic in the game until Shade of Zorn ended up coming around. But Gargantor, he did get like theoretically buffed now that we can actually see boost ratio on like how many kills have happened, so that we can know how much damage increase he'll have, because I believe it's 15 additional damage per thing. But even if you ended up getting infinite extra damage per kill that you got, like all you needed was one kill and he instantly kills everything in one shot, that still wouldn't be good, because it's really high mana cost. There's no extra turn, no board control, no nothing that you end up getting from it. And there's just no follow-up with him. He just goes and pokes something. If you want to go do his mechanic, you basically just do Ferris Raw, and you'll get free souls for doing so. There's just no point in ever using this troop. So yeah, obsoletes. Catches the Bull! Definitely going to be putting him up to S tier. S tier mainly because he is really good at upscaling. He's really good with Yasmin's Pride and Tower of Doom. He's really good for the low to mid level range delves, like level 20 all the way to about, or more so level 50 to about 200 or so for delves. Really good with like Mountain Crusher, Apothecary, double Ketris, stuff like that, or even single Ketris with like a Tina or something else. You can end up using Shaman hero class to give him half mana start, meaning he only needs 11 mana. And if you're doing that during an event, you technically only need 9 mana because the initial enchant would give it that 2 mana. So that's really cheap for being able to get a ability that basically one-shots whatever it touches and then does really high amount of half damage adjacents. The basic premise of how Catches the Bull works, ideally, is using him on battles where you can instantly win simply by casting him once on 2nd slot and then once on 4th slot. The main locations that you can do this is PvP, Guild Wars, lower range of Tower of Doom, and the lower range of Delves. Those are the biggest locations where you tend to shine, and it's just a great troop to have around. And as I mentioned, with Yasmin's Pride, he can feed it a bunch of HP and other similar things. He ends up boost ratioing off of HP, attack, and armor. You normally want to feed him HP, though, just because that keeps him from dying in game modes where you might be upscaling to try to survive. So Yasmin's Pride is just the basic main premise that you end up using with it. That weapon will be available in the future, because we do have weapon crafting coming in the future now. That will be one of those that will be craftable, and I will be having some videos going over those soon as well. Anyways, Possessed King. He's a really hard one to place. Mainly because there's a lot of stuff he's extremely meta for. But his ability is so inconsistent that I cannot put him in the S tier. He has one of the absolute best final traits in the game. And that is he explodes 2 random gems every single time you get an extra turn. This alone is basically 90% of the value of the troop. 80, 90%, depends how you look at it. This is insanely good with anything that's doing extra turn spam, whether it be converts, whether it be double converts, whether it be like those, the double converts that do skulls on the mana. Things like gem spawns, absolutely anything. Mountain Crusher clearing the board, explosions in general while you have a storm active. It's anything that's going to be gaining a lot of extra turns. This is the thing to have on your team, because you just keep clearing the board over and over and over again. Basically, every extra turn you do is a board clear, while 2 explosions generally isn't the board clear. Normally you would need at least like 4 or 5. If you just get 2 extra turns, then yeah, you basically just clear the board simply by using his ability. He's also used for his transform. He has the most amount of transforms of any troop in the game, and he can stack those. It's not the overall highest rate, it's 320%. But the main thing that makes this useful is it does stack. So for example, if there's only 1 enemy on the opposing team, you can transform it 3 times, reducing its stats or level by half each time. So if you're doing it in something like Delves, they're level 400. If you get a triple convert, the first one will knock it down to 200, the second will do it to 100, and then it will be all the way down to level 50. So you just dragged, potentially, obviously that's really rare, but you could theoretically drag a level 400 troop all the way down to level 50 very quickly with his ability. His ability is rather lackluster though. It has no amount of extra, aside from the transform, but he has no amount of extra, no board control attached, no explosions specifically on the ability, which I found really surprising. They didn't at least get a few explosions on his ability, but definitely make him S tier if he actually did have something like that, like maybe 5 explosions on his ability. Doesn't need much, just like how Furnace has, but end up being plenty enough. But the biggest thing holding him back is he does not have a storm attached to himself, so you normally need Mountain Crusher or some kind of other troop to cover that for you. He also just has really high inconsistency with his ability. Those transforms, it feels like he almost never gets his transforms when you need them. But overall, he's mainly just used for his mana, his final trait, so... still a really good troop to have around. He's also he's associated with Darkstone, which is currently the only kingdom that has a +1 magic bonus at 10 star at this current moment in time. Obviously, there'll be plenty of kingdoms that'll have that in the future. As it currently stands, that's also a factor that he's useful with, even though it's not directly used for a team. But yeah, it's used for a little bit of everything, just for extra mana accumulation, but more so Delves, more so than anything. Anyway, Scorpius, this is a bit of a weird one. I'm probably going to have to put him even lower than Champion of Anu, oddly enough. There just isn't really much use for Scorpius. He's okay with Weaver, and he's kind of okay with Yasmin. Biggest issue that this really has is, you know, I actually am going to put up to C. But it potentially has double instant kill. The biggest issue is there are more troops immune to poison than any other mechanic in the game. Like any other stats effect. More things have immune to poison than any other stats effect in the game. Not only is there Sturdy, there's all of Undead, there's all Dwarves, and there's all of Impervious. And that's not even counting Cleanse and other stuff, Bless, all that good stuff. But there's just so many things that have immune to the poison that you need for him to get his double instant kill. Other than that, he did get a nice buff several months back where you can multicast it. Yali into Scorpius is a combination that can be used on occasion. It's pretty inconsistent, but any battles that you can get away with it, you basically double Scorpius cast and you auto win the battle. So in those kind of situations, that's probably the only thing moving him up to C tier, is he can basically do a consistent Ubistet, in that the second you get poison, if and only if the enemy team has no immune or removal of poison. You can simply just double kill into double kill. And for that reason alone is probably why I'll put him all the way in the middle there. It's very rare that you can get away with that, but the situations that you can get away with that is what makes him somewhat okay. He could also theoretically be used on Brown Guild War, however, there isn't much that bothers using him in his current day. These days, speaking of that, Skady, probably another thing going right into that middle little tier there. She has a pretty decent summon that's a little bit outdated though. She ends up doing a Queen Mab summon, which has a lot of freeze on it. She has a double freeze, double mana burn. A lot of this will get completely countered by Bless and what's the other mechanic? Impervious. So you do have to be careful with that. But it's kind of average. You basically just use it for blue Guild War in any kind of time that you need a blue storm. The blue storm, her final trait, is the main thing that's keeping her relevant in that middle tier there. The blue storm is just going to constantly give you constant blues if you're using that with Azure, if you're using that with kind of any team that is very dependent on those blues in order to survive. It is generally going to be using those teams. Sometimes you would use like a Jar of Eyes to try to get that blue storm or something else instead. But in many instances, you can still bring out Skady, and it's relevant enough that you would be able to do that rather than Jar of Eyes in some specific situations. Next, Voice of Orpheus. This also going to be a kind of slightly hard one to put down. I'm probably going to have to put it down to D. It does theoretically have one good combo, but it's just never really used for that purpose currently. It has Impervious into multiple cleanses. It has Cleanse on its ability, and it has Cleanse off its trait. One of the better cleanses actually on the game on its traits, but it just isn't good for anything. It's literally good for one thing: countering anything that has mass silence. But there's one issue with that. The mechanic of silence is almost non-existent in the current state of the game, so it doesn't really come out much for that. It has a really lackluster ability. It seemed like it was kind of going to be like an inverse famine, but for whatever reason they gave it a 1x boost ratio rather than a 2. I have no clue why he doesn't have a 2x boost ratio, or even a 3x, since it's slightly harder to kind of get that mana going in that way. But I don't know, it just does not seem ever worth it. It's so little damage, and the only thing you're really getting from it is constant cleanse. And if you want that, you can just use Apothecary, you can use Mercy, and anything else that happens to be good with cleanse. Mostly Apothecary. Various Apothecary teams end up probably working out best. But it's just really lackluster compared to other troops that are available. Elma Grim! Something else that's probably going to go right in the middle here. One of the better Imperviouses in the game, which could theoretically actually move him up a little bit more. Main thing that I would kind of say that's kind of holding him back is Yasmin. I would say is a better Purple Guild War Day troop these days ever since it got buffed, so that's probably one of the things kind of keeping it more towards the middle there. But Elma Grim, one of the biggest things that it has going for is it has Perpetual Loop. It's particularly good with Infernus because you just put Infernus behind it. It gets a boost ratio on how many purples it can create based on how many enemies are burned, and you can end up simply getting a infinite purple loop by just constantly casting it over and over and over again for 12 purple spawn every single time, assuming the entire enemy team is alive and capable of being burned. And it just stacks a lot of damage very quickly. Has a 4 or 5 attack reduction. I keep forgetting because they keep like buffing and nerfing it. I believe it's currently at 4. It might be at 5 though. Probably at 4. But it has an attack reduction every single time it gets an extra turn. And with the fact that it infinite loops, it will basically zero out any team that you're fighting down to 0 attack, assuming that they have similar stats to you. But it's basically only used for Purple Guild War, and that is about as far as you use it. Maybe lower end of Tower of Doom. It might theoretically be usable in Dragons teams in the future. However, Dragons would need to get a half mana start, and they would need to get a better burner than what they have now for it to ever be viable in that context. But in that context, it could theoretically be good in the future, but right now, rather average. Something that's not that average, though, Megavore. Probably gonna have to put this into an A, maybe B. I feel like I personally don't use it that much these days. However, it's still an overall mechanic that you do generally like to have. It's a 4x armor tier, which is good in itself. It has 2x its magic and extra true damage it ends up doing. There's a lot of single target true damage to a single troop. This works good for any team that you just want to go and get a concentrated amount of damage on, get like a one-shot out of. Biggest thing holding it back is it has a really, really low HP and armor because it has such a high attack. And this is really bad because you don't actually really ever use it for its high attack. You're normally using this thing in like 3rd slot, 4th slot, normally more often than not. It's not really something that you're putting really far up in your team. The furthest front you're going to put it is 2nd slot, if even that. Normally it's more like a 3rd slot or so. But it just has a really, really low durability. Has Impervious, though. Does have Submerge, so it does have some protection in that regard. It tends to die out a little bit too often, though. But yeah, it gets a lot of damage off its armor tier. You end up doing that with like a physical damage troop. Something that can do physical damage very well, and it makes for a very good combination. It also has an 8% chance just to randomly get a free kill every extra turn you do. This used to be a pretty good mechanic for delves. You can still do it with that in delves. You can even do like a Megavore Weaver combo, still ends up working for quite a few delves. It's a great alternative for trying to kill things out. That obviously doesn't work as good in Tower of Doom, since Tower of Doom has an instant kill immunity there. Also, I wouldn't really use it for Guild Wars, just because the armor tier doesn't really count for damage unless you just didn't really have any other options. And you also don't use it too much for PvP. You can, however, you would need a really specific skull spam or physical damage team to really be able to quick kill with this. With how high its mana cost is, given that all Mythics generally have 20 plus, or all of them do, and this thing I believe is at 24. It just takes a while to get its mana up. Anyways, Queen Aurora. This is a little bit of a hard one to place. I'm probably going to have to put it to B tier just because it is a little bit worse than Possessed King in most situations. However, there are very few situations that Queen Aurora is actually better than Possessed King. These are mainly instances where you're trying to fill a 10 mana cost or 11 mana cost troop. Most noteworthy, the 10 mana cost troops like an Apothecary or a Green Seer, particularly Green Seer since it feeds back into itself and you can use on like Purple Guild War Day in that combo. But basically any kind of 10 or 11 mana cost troop that's really dependent on +1/+1 are the kind of troops that Queen Aurora tends to excel on, because Possessed King doesn't necessarily give you that kind of consistency, whereas Queen Aurora, you know you're going to be able to get those +1s whenever you need them. So if you need to 2-turn something with 10 mana, you can get that consistently, whereas if you have no +1s on something like a 10 mana cost troop and you're using Possessed King, you're not going to be able to get it up as consistently compared to a Queen Aurora just doing that for you. Queen Aurora, biggest thing holding her back is she does not buff herself. She gives an HP buff and a barrier to all allies but herself. She does not give that barrier to herself, and she does not give her that HP to herself. If she did both of those mechanics to herself, plus had cleanse, she would probably be S or A for sure, but she does not have those. But if they were to give her cleanse, easily A, and if they gave that effect to herself, the ability to cleanse, barrier, and HP regain, she would definitely be probably the mid-range of S tier actually, but she does not, so she is not. But great alternative to Possessed King in really specific situations. Venezia! Do I put it this low? I think I put it this low. Oh no, is it fair to put it lower than Skady? I might need to lower Skady if I do that. I guess I'll put it in C tier. But it's good in early game. I've been using it some on my Nintendo Switch accounts. It is actually good in early game, mid game, earlier part of late game possibly. Anything beyond that, it falls off super hard though. I'm currently using it as an alternative to Queen Titania because I don't currently have Queen Titania. Queen Titania is vastly superior to it, which is a lower rarity. Same problem that quite a few troops have. We're literally a lower rarity of it. I think Yasmin has that biggest issue, where Web Spinner, a rarity below it, is a much superior version of it. Phoenicia basically has that same problem. Queen Titania is basically her much superior option, which basically makes her obsolete once you actually own that troop, which is quite ironic that I don't have it on my other account. Yeah, I somehow have her. But besides that, it has some Fairy Fires that ends up getting down. Not as good as Queen Titania, Glitter Claw, and some other options, but it still has Fairy Fire nonetheless, which is 50% extra spell damage that you can get down. Has a double lifesteal that I can end up doing, plus a magic gain to the two strongest. So it has some things going for it. The biggest issue is it just takes so ridiculously long to win with, and you're basically never really going to bother trying to bring that out just to try to use those mechanics. There's no true damage teams you'd really bring it into. Yeah, there's just better options out there that you'd almost never really touch your Phoenicia unless you were just lacking other options in the game. So, okay, Mythic, nothing too special. You might bring her out for some PvP stuff, and maybe very occasionally some Guild Wars stuff, but that's about it. Okay, Doomclaw. Given that he's a slightly better Wolf Garrick, I'm probably gonna have to put him into D tier. However, he is just a little bit too inconsistent, similar to Wolf Garrick, to really be considered viable. He has a double Devour on him, 225% chances, and while it says it does it to the next one in line, so it actually does have a kind of unique ability in that when it does something to its adjacent, it actually does go to the next one. It doesn't specifically say adjacent on the card. It says the one below and above. So for example, if you are fighting a team and they only have a first slot, a third slot, and a fourth slot, if you cast on their third slot, it will try to devour the first slot between the gap as well as the fourth slot. So it actually will still try to devour both of them, even though there is a gap there. But the biggest issue is it's just a really low percent chance. It does have some enrage going with it, but you'd better off just basically using Titan Hero in your first slot if you want to have a mechanic similar to him, and maybe just gamble with Black Manacles. While it would be slightly less overall, the hero class itself would be way better than what the Wolf Garrick would be. It's a rather lackluster troop. It might have some better uses in the future, but the biggest issue is it's just always going to have that inconsistency until it just gets some better combinations that it might be able to be used with. So, Undying, another thing that's probably just going to go in the middle there. Really good on Blue Guild War. Has a silence that can also end up countering all blues. Great on Blue Guild War Defend. Really good with the new hero class that end up coming out, that one Merlantis hero class thing. It's rather lackluster for doing damage, even though it does have an okay amount of damage that kind of gets a double poke. But it's nothing like a Ketris, nothing like an Infernus. Even Ubistat, kind of weak compared to. Just kind of just average in almost every regard, other than for Blue Guild War countering. Even offensive and defensively. Ironically, since he's so good for Blue Guild War Defend, a lot of people will use him in very heavy blue counter teams to try to counter other blue counter teams. So quite ironically, he is somewhat good for both the blue invasion and defending side of Guild Wars, since and one of the best counters to Undying is another Undying, ironically. So yeah, it ends up working out kind of convenient for that. But that's about as far as his usefulness goes, is Blue Guild War. And some very, very niche instances with the new Merlantis hero class. Tanye, where do you go? I want to say D, but he is more towards the average area. I feel like I'm starting to put too many into C area right now, but he is towards the average side. He does have several things. He covers a lot of ground, but the biggest issue is he doesn't excel at any of those things. He's basically a Ketris that has stun and a summon. That on paper sounds like it should be really good, but it's not, because its condition for extra damage just isn't that good. You need to worry about the overall amount of damage it does. It still doesn't even hit higher than Ketris once you start getting like boost on your Ketris. It does have a triple stun, but things like Obsidian and many other stun options just do it better. And he does have a summon, but the only context that would really come in handy on is Guild War. And even on that, you might not necessarily need it. He's just overall just basically a weaker version of Ketris that has a few more utilities on top of him, and just isn't good because of that, unfortunately. So, yeah, I'm not sure exactly where you would end up using that. Next up is Suna, and I just realized I accidentally just described Suna when I mentioned Phoenicia. Everything I just mentioned for Phoenicia, that is Suna. Whoops. But they would both still be kind of in the middle there. Phoenicia, what Phoenicia does is a full AoE damage that's dependent on some Red Storm. It's kind of okay. Similar to Suna, it is still going to be useless in that regard. Gosh, their art is so similar. Whoops. But yeah, everything I mentioned for Phoenicia is Suna. And Phoenicia is just basically a strong AoE. It reminds me kind of like a... it's really similar to that of Guard's Avatar, except with a storm kind of requirement rather than an armor requirement. There even are instances where I might even consider it more in line with something like a Guard's Avatar, but I guess we'll keep it in a C just because there are some specific contexts in mid-game where the amount of boost ratio it gets is actually good enough to use for its damage output. So if you get this thing earlier on in the game, it probably is considered a little bit higher. At my stay in the game, I'd probably even consider it towards over here, but it does have those instances where it at least has its viability towards earlier in the game. Next up, we have Draculus. Draculus, biggest issue with this, similar to Crimson Back kind of these days, is there just isn't really much of a need for full AoE true damage. Of course, Reality has that same mechanic, but at least it has a summon and a few other things going for it. Only thing Draculus really does is AoE, then it ends its turn. It's basically weaker than Crimson Bat in many instances. It just isn't really that good. It's going to get a lot of HP, but it's not any good since it doesn't have immune to Devour. It's just going to devour you or instant kill you or something like that. It just isn't really that viable for much. So if you own Crimson Bat, it's another one of those mythics where a legend is better than it. There's just so many out there, like Web Spinner being better than Yasmin, Queen of Tanya being better than Suna, and that is Suna, not that one. That one is Suna. And Crimson Bat being better than Draculus. It's just really weird that these mythics are sometimes weaker versions of their similar legendary counterpart, which doesn't really make much sense in the whole scheme of things, but that is how they are. Anyways, next one that we have here, War. It's somewheres here. I'm probably going to put it right in the middle, mainly because it has one good combination, and that is Queen Jezebel. War plus Queen Jezebel. You feed a bunch of attack into War. He gets a, his amount of damage that he ends up doing is based on his amount of attack. You end up constantly keep getting that up. You keep one-shotting stuff with Queen Isabel into him. You keep one-shotting stuff with his ability that gives you an extra turn. And you basically just keep going and stacking a bunch of attack. Biggest downside he has is he got buff nerfed like a year and a half ago. And he ends up getting his 50% chance to do true damage taken away from him. And ever since they ended up taking that away from him, he's just been so much weaker. I don't know why they gave him Inferno Armor, 25% Skull Reflect, compared to his 50% true damage. He would probably be around a B or even an A if he still had that 50% true damage, but they just buff nerfed him a while back, and he's just never really been the same since. I personally almost never use him, or pretty much never, because the only context is, of course, Queen Isabel and some Knight teams, but that's about it. Plague! Do I F-tier you? Does Plague deserve to be F tier? I want to say yes. I believe the answer to that is yes. He does have Impervious. He does have some stat reduction on his extra turns. But all he really is a disease. You can do that off of Plague Lord. He has some stat reduction on it, but Azura, literally a troop you get for free from the Kingdom of Merlantis, is basically better than this thing. It just isn't much of a need for Plague Lord. For Plague himself, I mean. You could just use Plague Lord plus Azura instead, the hero class of Plague Lord plus Azura, and then boom. You just got yourself a stronger version than Plague himself. There just is no real purpose for him. He's not associated to any kingdom, though they might be adding all the Apocalypse troops to Sinner Mirage into the future. As it currently stands, he just so lackluster. Wish they would reduce his mana some, or let him do some greens, do some green explosions, something. But he's one of those really first few mythics that came into the game, and it really shows with how bad he currently is. Oh, Famine! I remember the days where you should have been put like right above S tier, like S+. Though in the current state of the game, he's probably going to have to be a B. Famine of all the Apocalypse troop is actually the most viable Apocalypse troop, oddly enough. The main thing that makes him good, he is a 4x mana drain. Of course, you could do this off of Sloth, but he uses 3 manas. So he ends up getting them pretty quickly if you end up using like Mountain Crusher to feed him mana or some kind of similar mechanic where you can explode or just feed a lot of mana off the board, Apothecary, Green Seer, anything like that you might be combining him with. But yeah, 4x mana drain into a one-shot normally because it gets a 2x boost ratio per all the mana it drains. If it drains something like 50 mana, well, you just increased your damage by 100 to hit like, what, 130 or something? It's like basically like a Fair's Raw for a cast at that point with how much damage it does. But yeah, it's mainly used for its 4x mana drain. Biggest issue now is there's a lot of things that have immune to mana drain. Prior to things having immune to mana drain, and back when Daemons were a lot more meta, he would easily be S tier if not above. But right now he is just simply somewhere around the middle. Probably a little bit above average because he's decent for Guild Wars. I personally don't use him much for Guild Wars, but he's good on Guild War Defend. He's good on Guild War Offend if you don't have other options. And he's just a good mana drain utility troop if you're up against things that have really high mana cost that have no counter to it, like other Mythics, Wardbreaker, Gogh, other similar things to those mechanics. Def, another Apocalypse troop. They're all kind of back to back right here, it seems like. So, Def, I'm probably going to have to put to D tier. I even got that, I just believe, on my first Mythic on my Nintendo Switch account. I didn't even bother using it. Just Def Mark is too inconsistent. The biggest thing holding Def Mark in the current state of the game back from being viable is it still has a 1-turn delay when you reapply a Def Mark. Basically, how Def Mark works is as a 1-turn, or at least currently, it used to have a 2-turn delay, then a 0-turn delay, now currently a 1-turn delay. But basically what I mean by that is when you place a Def Mark onto an enemy, there's a 1-turn delay before it will end up having a 10% chance to start killing them. The biggest issue with how Def Mark currently acts right now, when Def or anything else Def Marks all enemies, is if you reapply Def Mark to something that is already Def Marked, it will reapply the 1-turn delay on if it will die to that 10%. So basically you just went from 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, and then you reapply the Def Mark, and whoops, next turn is 0%, and then goes back to 10% again, and until it naturally cleanses off the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 10% cumulative that it has. But the 10% chance to kill goes back to 0%. The turn after you reapply it. If they removed it, if they still kept the 1-turn delay, but they removed the 1-turn delay if it was already Def Marked. So for example, if you re-Def Mark something that is already Def Marked, if they remove the reapplying of that 1-turn delay, he would probably be moved up to like B or A. But without that mechanic, he just is not worth using. So for that purpose, I'm putting him down to D. He can maybe still get some Def Mark kills here or there, but he's just really inconsistent. And the way Def Mark currently functions is just really underwhelming. Exynos, I honestly have to put him into F. He's probably more of a D, but honestly, he has to be an F. He's one of those kind of ridiculously just 100% useless mythics to such a point that you basically only get him for the achievement, and that is it. He's rather expensive too, since you have to get 3 weapons and then craft him. You basically just craft him for the emoji, or not the emoji, the icon for global chat, and for the achievement that's on most of the platforms. And that is about as far as you go with him. He summons a bunch of undeads only if he gets a kill. Every single multi-summon in the game, or pretty much every single multi-summon in the game, I think there might be one other exception, has a 100% chance to do a multi-summon. Yet the only mythic that has multi-summon, actually I think there might have been another one too, has a condition on that multi-summon. It just doesn't make any sense. Undeads are already bad, which is what it summons, and it has a requirement of getting a kill to be able to do those summons. And even if it had 100% for that, it's just so ridiculously bad. He can sometimes kind of pull wins because he kind of keeps stacking over time. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And for that reason, he probably is more of a D. But I don't know. He's, with how much he costs and everything, he just has to be an F, honestly. So I'm just going to keep him there as a F. Next, Queen of Sin. Oh, Queen of Sin. Where on earth do I put you? I'm leaning more towards a D. The biggest issue with her ability, and I'd probably put her up to a B if it was otherwise, but the biggest issue I have to really say with her ability is the fact that it is a chance of summoning a Lust or a Wrath. If it was just one or the other, like 100% Wrath or 100% Lust, I would probably have her quite a bit higher. But I don't know. It's like a C or D right now. I'm just going to keep her in D though. But I don't know. The fact that she has a 50% chance on one or the other is the biggest thing that's holding her back. Because you basically want to kind of keep using her ability to keep replacing out one of your slots. And if you're going to be constantly replacing out one that's a little bit further back, you can kind of use her in the Lust team and kind of use her all in on Charm, which would make sense. But if you want to use her more Skull Spam, obviously you'd want to have the Wrath. But I don't know. It's just kind of in an in-between where she's just way too inconsistent to bother ever using, and she more so just makes your team cluttered rather than actually helping you win the battle, it feels like. Fallen Valdis, easy F. It was made to counter Divines, and it can't even do that properly. Even when it was they made it to try to counter Divines, it was even useless then. And then when Divines were nerfed and you still tried to use it to counter Divines, it was still useless then. They basically made a Divine counter that can't even properly counter Divines, and it's completely useless against anything other than Divines. So I don't know what they were thinking with that thing, but it is bad. It is really bad. Okay, next up, Obsidian. This is probably either a B or a. Not sure really which one to put it into, though I'm probably going to go more towards a B. It has one of the best stuns in the game, has a 4-time stun, or whenever it gets an extra turn. Biggest thing holding it back, even though it is very similar to the premise of Infernus, the biggest issue is its 2 hits are not guaranteed. The second hit, I believe, is 50% chance. They were even going to originally make it even lower than that. But it's not 100% chance like what Infernus's is. Yeah, he overall even does less damage than what it would be. He does one single hit, and then 75% to do adjacents, and then a 50% chance to do one single hit, and then 25% to adjacents, which would how they have their magic, even just based on that value alone. I believe Infernus gets a few extra damage with how it is. So they basically made a weaker version of Infernus that just happens to stun rather than burn. That is more based on stone with brown rather than fire with red. But yeah, it's just not as viable. You still use it for its stun mechanic whenever you do need that stun, particularly with curse mechanic, to basically completely disable our troops. But other than that, you don't really bring it out for its damage because Infernus is just the vastly superior thing. You can sometimes use them together, but it's just definitely definitively worse than it. Next up, Gogh. Gogh I can't put into S tier for many reasons. It's just too expensive, and there's very few situations that you can really get it out for, but I am going to have to put it into A. It does have Impervious. It does have an instant kill that does hit through barrier. Most instant kills don't hit through barrier. Like, for example, the 8% off of Megavores off his extra turn, that will not hit through barrier. Zogoth's, yes, he will. So he does have that ability to hit through barrier, which is nice. He's mostly used for delves, I would say. Particularly with Iron Gut. However, you can also just use it in locations where you can't use Iron Gut. You basically use them as the alternative Iron Gut, which is one of the reasons why he's kind of towards S, because he's basically the replacement for Iron Gut and Delves. However, he's just not good enough in other game modes. PvP generally is a little bit risky and slow to use him. Same kind of problem with using him in Guild Wars. He has the highest mana cost in the entire game, so he's really bad against mana drain and other similar mechanics that tends to hold him back. 32 mana cost, same kind of problem that Wardbreaker has, except it's still slightly more viable because of its really usefulness in Delves. But just has a lot of negatives going for it that makes it preventing it from being all the way up there. But it's basically an alternative version of Iron Gut these days that just happens to be the most expensive troop in the entire game, costing 8 power orbs. It takes like a year and a half to be able to obtain him. So it takes a very long time, and that's assuming you're playing and doing all the events. Could take literal years to actually obtain him. He's not really something so viable that you have to get him, because Iron Gut will do like 90% of the stuff he can do in most situations. But there are those really specific instances that Gogh is actually a Iron Gut replacement. But very, very rarely does that come into play. And other than that, the final one we have is Shade of Zorn. Shade of Zorn, completely useless. That's just going to go all the way in the last slot there. Biggest thing holding back Shade of Zorn is very similar to that of Gargantor's uselessness. And that is mainly that it just has no purpose. There's things that outclass it left and right. There are literal commons better than that thing and rares. And it has a double summon that it only gets when it ends up getting a kill. Anything that ever has a mechanic like that tends to be towards the weaker side, especially when that's one of their main mechanics is getting that summon. It just doesn't have enough damage. It seems like you're supposed to kind of use this with constantly taking damage in order to get that 4 mana that he ends up gaining. But he has immune to poison, so you can't even poison him. You would have to bleed him if you want to get that mechanic. But there's no consistent way to bleed your allies. You would have to like curse and then poison him, like a poison bleed or something like that. Who knows? Maybe they'll make a curse poison bleed that you can apply to your ally or something. That would kind of be useful because you can kind of keep getting stacked mana on that. But no, other than that, this is not really going to have any purpose. And bleed mechanics are extremely underused, so you would never use them to try to counter bleed. And even if you were, he just has that damage kind of issue, where all he's kind of doing is just trying to do a bunch of damage to a single troop. And it just isn't really going to do that much when you're trying to poke things down, and you just don't have any kind of... just being able to poke a single troop down isn't really a mechanic that you generally want without any side effects. No extra explosion, no extra board control, no extra nothing on top of the ability. Just is not that good. But anyways, guys, I believe that will mostly wrap this up. As I mentioned, this video was going to get a little bit long, but I did want to get at least one longer video since I won't be doing streams during this time. But if you guys still have any other questions, let me know. That is personally my tier list. If you feel like making any adjustments or anything yourself, feel free to mention them. Also, as I mentioned, I will go link that other person's... oh wow, I already forgot the name of their channel now. No, it was something Key Lime, I believe it was. But yeah, I'll go link their channel as well, who ended up suggesting doing this, as well as their video that they ended up doing, going over it. But there's personally my tier list of all the mythics that currently exist in the game. Might be a few adjustments here or there, and I could probably make even more if I was actually specifically like looking over the troops a bit more. But for the most part, I think I memorized most of what they do correctly when making this list, except for that one Suna Phoenicia mix-up. But other than that, I think I got most of them pretty much down. Also, I slightly forgot what Queen of Sin's other effect was. Slightly on Shade of Zorn too. Like all the more recent ones, it feels like were the ones I slightly forgot a little bit more. But for the most part, that's how it is. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it, and I will catch all of you later. Thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye, everyone, and have a wonderful week.